What is going on, Kane Sport? Izubee Charles, joined by Stephen Wagner for another Inside Canes Recruiting podcast. Stephen, these past 2 weekends we've been on the road. You were in Orlando, I was in Atlanta, checking out some of Miami's top targets from across the country. But this upcoming weekend, we don't have to travel too far, as the Under Armour camp is going to be down there in Miami this weekend. A ton of big time names expected to be competing in one of the biggest camps that South Florida has to offer this spring. Stephen, just off the top of your head, you had a chance to look through that list a little bit. Who are some guys that you're excited to compete and speak with, at the Under Armour camp in Miami this weekend?
I think Jordan Campbell was definitely one of the first names that popped out to me, just because we haven't really had a chance to see him in quite a while in a football setting. We had a chance to go to a Carroll City game last year. He wasn't playing; he was a little bit banged up, so we weren't able to see him then. The couple of times that we have seen him has either been on campus or at a game or at some sort of event or something like that. So we haven't really had a chance to see him actually work out in a football setting in quite some time. I'm really interested to see how he looks, how he moves, outside of pads and in a shirt and shorts, because from what we have seen on his film, I mean, he really does look like a stud baller and one of these guys who's like absolutely going to be a consensus 4-star prospect. He's definitely someone who I'm really excited to see. Darion Coleman is supposed to be there too. Really excited to see him throw. Kind of, see how he stacks up to some of the other top quarterbacks. One of the things that I'm kind of interested to see is how he compares whenever he's throwing side by side with Dia Bell, the 5-star Texas quarterback commit. From right in Miami's backyard. Looking at these two dudes right next to each other. Is there a gap? How much of a gap is there? Is Darion maybe even a little bit better than Dia? I don't know, but that's kind of what these things are for, is having the opportunity to see these dudes go up against each other, right next to each other. And then Calvin Russell too. Every single time that I've seen him, he's gotten a little bit bigger. His measurements have gotten a little bit freakier. He truly is like a freak athlete, basketball star, football star, do it all guy, top one or consensus top 100 prospect. Obviously, with the way things have been trending lately, it kind of looks like Syracuse has a little bit of momentum right now, but also a super, super, super huge priority to Miami. Someone Miami does not want to let leave their backyard. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, and I kind of want to piggyback off what you said about Darion Coleman, because obviously, we've seen him tear it up at these 7-on-7 events, since January. And recently, On3 just released their latest rankings. He got a pretty big bump. I believe he jumped into that top 175 prospects. I think he was sitting around, the mid 300. So pretty big boost. And obviously, I think that has to correlate with his performances at these 7-on-7 tournaments. And this is a massive junior year that he had. Fell short in the state championship, but broke numerous records at Jones High School. Steve, just want to get your input, and talking about a little bit more. Do you think that, jump in the rankings was well deserved for Darion, and what else do you want to see from him, moving forward too?
Yeah, so whenever I had the chance to watch him in a couple of settings, or in a couple of actually pads on football settings last year, the arm talent is absolutely there. He throws the ball, I think, as well as anyone. Really quick release. I mean, you watch the way he kind of just whips the ball out. I mean, he is efficient. He is accurate. I think that he'll. I think he's going to be someone who will, continue to kind of add velocity to his throws, sort of, just as he naturally gets older, and as his body and as his body naturally adds on more muscle. But one of the things that I kind of felt like he could get stuck on sometimes last year was it felt like he would just kind of predetermine where the ball needs to go before the ball's actually snapped. Maybe he wouldn't get through his progression super fast or anything like that. Obviously this camp isn't going to be the best thing for that, but that's going to be something that I'm going to be looking for as we get further and further into the spring, as we continue on the 7-on-7 circuits. Obviously he does look like he's improved a lot, just from just over the last couple of months from what we have seen from him in 7-on-7. I think he's a stud. I think that Miami once again did a really good job evaluating quarterbacks and finding a guy that maybe wasn't quite as well valued by the rest of the recruiting market. Before evaluations had totally been finished, Miami got him very early, and right now it's looking like he's a guy who people are continuing to buy stock in, and I think rightly so. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see kind of how well he throws a deep ball. I'm excited to see kind of how he gels with receivers who he's never seen before and might never see again. This is going to be his first time throwing with a ton of these guys. Obviously, Larry Miles is expected to be there too. I'm excited to see him. He's a dude I think is going to end up at Miami. Darion Coleman's, like tight friend, been to Miami a ton of times. Miami definitely has some very real interest in him. But I am excited to see Darion throw in a competitive setting.
Yeah, along with Dia Bell, four-star Florida Gators commit Will Griffin will also be in attendance too. So a lot of talented arms, are going to be in Miami on Sunday, and Darion Coleman's going to have yet another opportunity to showcase why he deserves to be in that conversation as one of the best quarterbacks, not only Florida but in the country as well. So that's definitely one storyline we'll be staying tuned with this upcoming weekend. And a few other guys that I want to bring up to talk about are pair of running back targets in that 2026 class that are doing really well in their recruitment. And Miami's in a good spot in that recruitment as well. Start off with Derek Cooper out of Chaminade Almadon, who won a state title this year, as well as Javian Mallory right up the road in West Boca, two guys that are local prospects that have been making a lot of big plays, throughout their high school career. Miami's taking notice at prioritize those two guys. But Steven, you're working on a piece, kind of giving a little bit intel on that running back recruitment in the 2026 class. Obviously, everyone loves to keep, the big guys home, but the Hurricanes are casting that net far and wide. So just what are some other running backs in that 2026 class that you have your eye on and the latest intel with those guys?
Yeah, so right now Miami's got 6 guys locked in for official visits. Amari Latimer has locked in an OV. Derek Cooper has locked in an OV. Javian Osborne, Javian Mallory, Favor Akai, and Jay Lamar. The further that we get into the cycle, those are really the 6 names that we're hearing Miami is really focusing on, and we're seeing Miami really focus intensely on. You talk to any of those guys, Matt Merritt, Miami staff, they are constantly communicating with them. They're making them feel like really, really big time priorities. I would expect all of them to continue being in close contact with Miami through the spring. I think at some point, each of them will probably end up coming down to Miami's campus, even if they don't have dates set yet. But those are really the guys who we're seeing Miami is really focusing on right now. There have been, I think Tuesday there was an offer that went out to a running back in Ohio. From what I've been able to gather, Miami's kind of monitoring him. They're going to keep an eye on him. They're going to see they're going to, kind of see how his evaluation goes. They're going to try to get a feel for how much they really like him or how interested they are in him. But those 6 4-star running backs that I just mentioned, all of them have OVs locked in with Miami, and all of them are dudes that Miami is really going hard after. Right now, Javian Mallory from West Boca, right now, he's probably the back that I feel best about. If you had to ask me which of those backs is going to end up at Miami, I would bet heavily on Javian Mallory. It's just kind of, reading the tea leaves, the way things are trending. I've heard a lot of good things on a lot of different sides about Javion, and I feel very good about where things sit right now. Favor Akai, there were a ton of RPMs that came in for him last month. I don't necessarily know if he's totally ready, to pull the trigger right away or something or anything like that. And of course, how the commitments end up coming is also going to be another thing that could potentially affect what the class looks like. Because, let's say theoretically, you get Derek Cooper and Javian Mallory to commit right away. You get them to commit, let's say, the first week of summer. They're your first 2 running backs to come. Well, now, you have to ask yourself, well, you've already got 2 running backs committed. Do you just want to start, cramming in other backs and end up taking, 3 running backs or 4 running backs? So that's obviously something that that we'll kind of keep an eye on as sort of the order in which these guys end up coming off the board. And keep in mind, Miami most likely looks like they're probably going to take two running backs in this class. That was initially the plan for them last year. It definitely looked like they were going to end up taking two backs. Then Gerard Pringle went ahead and committed. Miami's running back room was already very, very healthy. Things kind of didn't pan out with Byron Lewis. He ended up ultimately committing to Florida State and then eventually to Florida. Communication kind of fizzled out with Miami, but it does look like they are getting back to taking two running backs in this class. I think it'll probably be some combination of those six guys. Now, which combination it's going to be, I'm not sure. I'm willing to bet that Javian Mallory is going to be a part of that combination. Heck, I feel very, very good about that right now. Miami's continuing to do well with Derek Cooper. He's going to take 5 official visits, though, so nothing set in stone there. But kind of given the track record that Miami has recruiting Chaminade in recent years, I think that there's probably going to be a chance that Miami's going to do enough to end up keeping Cooper home. Amari Latimer, he's been a guy who's been a little bit hard to really get a true read on, but he is going to come visit Miami June 6th for an official visit. Has a ton of Miami ties. Jay Lamar, it looks like Georgia's kind of starting to do a good job like sinking their teeth into him. And he might be hard to pull away from Georgia just because, UGA is right there. You've got Kirby Smart. You've got, all of that stuff going for him. Obviously, the appeal of playing for a program like Georgia, I think definitely holds some weight there. But he also has Miami ties in the fact that his cousin, Nye Carr, who was his former teammate, also currently goes to Miami and sort of unofficially hosted him on his unofficial visit the last time that he was in Coral Gables. They spent quite a while hanging out. So I'm not totally counting Miami out of the mix there. And then Javian Osborne, kind of a name that sort of came out of nowhere here over the last couple of weeks because just my personal thought, I figured for a long time he was going to end up at either Texas or Michigan. But Rashard Choice, the running backs coach at Texas, leaving the program to go to the NFL. It seems like that's kind of opened a little bit of a door for Miami to really come back into the mix. Right now, his recruitment honestly does kind of feel wide open. I'm really not certain where he's going to end up. I mean, I know Michigan has, put in a lot of work and Michigan's done a good job with him, but honestly, right now, I have no idea because Osborne's a kid who this time last month, I had very, very little confidence that Miami was even going to get him on campus again. But now, he's gone ahead and locked in an official visit. It sounds like there's, some actual interest from both sides. I'm not completely, overlooking Osborne either. I don't think it's, a ridiculous idea to say that Miami can land him. I really do think that that's possible. But either way, bottom line, we're really starting to get a feel for the guys who could conceivably end up in Miami's running backs class. Go check it out.
Yeah, a lot of intel on those top 6 running backs. Steven did a great job of really breaking down that board and kind of, giving you a little bit of look of, what Coach Merritt and those guys down there at Coral Gables are thinking about the running backs. And want to add, my 2 cents to it too, with Javian Osborne, starting with him. Steven, I agree with you 100%. Last month, Miami didn't make his top 8 or 10 schools, and then boom, they get the official visit. I had the chance to speak with him. He said the biggest thing was Coach Merritt really, showing how much he was wanted in Coral Gables. Made 2 trips to the Lone Star State to check in on Javian Osborne, who, like you said before, Tsar's choice made his way to the NFL. Looks like Texas was written all over that. Michigan's in the mix as well too, but I really do think this one is wide open, and these official visits are going to be huge in his ultimate decision. And another thing that I want to touch on that you mentioned is which running back dominoes fall first. Obviously, last year we saw Gerard Pringle, announce that commitment in the spring, which kind of set the tone for running backs like Byron Lewis or Shakai Mills Knight, who ended up at Ole Miss. So with whichever guy kind of pulls that trigger first, it is really kind of sets the tone with what direction they headed for the rest of the summer. And I do agree with you. I think that plan is to take 2 running backs this class after not getting 2. And with Derek Cooper and Javian Mallory, I really do think Miami's going to land one, if not both of those guys. Obviously, Derek Cooper's a little bit of a different situation than Javian. was formerly committed to Georgia for about 48 hours, and then backed off that commitment. But I do think the Bulldogs are in a really good spot. Obviously, Ohio State is another program that's recruiting him. We know they like to, come down and try to swoop to some of the best out of South Florida. So a lot of different schools, in that recruitment. But I do think, right now with Javion, it's a Miami, Michigan, Notre Dame race. Those three schools are really in the mix. But I do like where Miami stands right now. So make sure to check out that intel on those 2026 running back targets. And then as we close out the show today, want to close the door on the 2025 class. As we all know, I think everyone but one signee in the 2025 high school recruiting class is going to be participating in spring practices on Monday. We'll have our first chance to see those guys in a Hurricanes uniform. Obviously, we know what they can do at the high school level, and they've proven that they're some of the best at their position in the country. But now it's time to play in, the big leagues or whatever you may call it. Really, really excited to see some of these guys. And Steven, wanted to ask you, who are you excited to see? But I'll keep this one off first. This is kind of a weird one. I'm really excited to see Luke Nickel. Obviously, we know Carson Beck isn't going to be throwing this spring, and Luke Nickel has a chance to earn some first team reps. Obviously, Emory Williams is there, Jet Anderson is there, but I do want to see if he can kind of take control of that QB room. Has all the talent in the world. We've both watched him over these last 2 years. Another great evaluation by Shannon Dawson. But I'm excited to see this quarterback battle with Luke Nickel, Jet Anderson, Emory Williams. Then on the defensive side of the ball, two guys I want to see: Jabari Antoine and Amari Wallace. Obviously, we know they're super talented, but are both coming off significant leg injuries. Looks like they're healthy right now, but do want to see how they progress and how they do go at full speed. So, Steve, with that being said, who are some guys that you're excited to see from that 2025 class as we finally close the door on those guys officially?
I'm really interested to see Dalen Upshaw. Very good explosive route runner. That Miami had very high grades on last fall. I'm really excited to see what happens with him. But probably the guy that I'm most excited to see is Malachi Tony. And this kid I think is almost kind of a phenom in the fact that he did reclassify. He is in college 1 full year earlier than he's supposed to be, and yet I genuinely believe that he's one of these kids who's going to have a serious chance to be an instant impact candidate and immediately compete for a starting spot. The kid isn't even 18 yet. I seriously believe that he has an awesome chance to come in and potentially start right away for Miami. I think there will be a little bit of an adjustment period, but I think he is a kid whose superpower is adaptability. I think he adapts just absolutely tremendously and really can adapt in such a wide variety of ways. It doesn't matter if it's if it's in game. It doesn't matter if it's a new team. It doesn't matter if it's a new practice setting. I don't think it's going to matter if it's a new coach. I think that it doesn't even matter if it's a new position. I mean, hell, we saw him in the state championship game throw for like almost 200 yards. I think he only had like 2 or 3 incompletions in the first half. I mean, he was just absolutely spectacular. I think he is going to adapt and learn and figure out how to fit in seamlessly during the spring. I think what's going to happen is, he'll probably have a little bit of a bumpy start. It'll take him a little bit of time to adapt, but then eventually I think at some point the game is going to start slowing down for him. And I do think he's going to be one of these true freshmen that we're all really keeping an eye on and thinking to ourselves, holy cow, that maybe this kid, really is going to be one of these plug and play guys. I know a lot of people are high on Josh Moore. I am too. I've said before, I think he has the highest ceiling of anyone Miami signed in last year's class. I think if he clicks the way that I think he can click, he will end up being a first-round draft pick. But that being said, I also think that he's one of the more raw prospects that Miami signed and that he could really benefit from an offseason or heck, maybe even 2 off seasons to sort of hone his craft and refine his game. Because, kind of looking at him, he does look like a guy where, maybe there's a little bit of work that needs to be done. Maybe he needs to refine himself a little bit. Kevin Beard, I think, is the perfect guy to do something like that. But I think after one off season of really high level college instruction, I think he will eventually get to that point. I'm just not totally certain that it's going to be one of these deals where he comes in and he is immediately ready the second they steps on campus, because I really do think that that's going to be a big ask. But like I said, I truly do think that if things play out the way I think they can play out, he can be a first round draft pick. I fully believe he can be a first round pick.
Yeah, a ton of talent, going to be showcasing their skill down in Coral Gables for the first time this upcoming Monday. We'll have you covered from the recruiting aspect with a ton of visitors expected to visit throughout this fall, which is, something that we haven't even mentioned, but we'll mention, a lot next week on the podcast. But excited to see what these 2025 kids can do, and excited to see which 2026, 2027, and even 2028 kids are going to be down there in spring with the Hurricanes, checking out what they have to do. So that's all that we have for this episode of Inside Canes Recruiting Podcast. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your day.